Welcome back into Love of the Stars. Zach Wolchuk alongside the Super Bowl winning scout, Brian Broaddus. And my goodness, what a week it's been for Cowboy action as we had, of course, the meetings going on. We got to hear from Brian Schottenheimer. We got to hear from Jerry Jones. We got some Micah Parsons contract talk. And the Cowboys have a new backup quarterback, Brian Broaddus. As you were on the scene for this one, you're like, hey, I'm hearing this Joe Milton stuff. It's real. Well, it happened. Cowboys go ahead and give the New England Patriots a 5th-round pick in exchange for Joe Milton and a 7th-round pick. So, the Cowboys have been wheeling and dealing a little bit here this offseason, but now we had a couple of shows with myself, you, I know Eric Chiafalo, and you talked about it. Like, what about the quarterbacks in this draft class? Where are the Cowboys going to go? Well, Peyton, you can probably go ahead and trash those because I think the Cowboys have their backup quarterback now in Joe Milton, Brian Broaddus.
Yeah, they do. And, we've been very critical of the Cowboys at times during their off season of going out and, telling us that this is a 24/7 job, and it's not. It's a 2-day job, and then they take the other 5 days and don't do anything. But the fact that they've used trades, the fact they've used free agency, not to the level of, potentially spending hundreds of millions of dollars but they've used it in a way to help fill some holes that they had with some losses. They couldn't go through another season of just allowing players to walk away and them not address any of that. So I think in some areas they might have upgraded. In other areas, they, maybe not as much. Maybe in an area or two, they might have got worse. But this is, with the trades and then the way they've signed players. And then you mentioned about the Joe Milton thing. I had heard through the grapevine that they were interested. There were several people in the organization that said, listen, we're working on it. So that gave me the encouragement to go and try and find other avenues to figure it out. And I was able to do that. And so the compensation was something that we talked about. It was a 5th-round pick. Dallas gets back a 7th. That's the first pick in the 7th round, by the way. So it's basically like what you did is you got Joe Milton for, like really a pick swap is what you did, if you think about it that way. So, good for the Cowboys of landing a backup quarterback. I don't know about you, Zach. Well, I shouldn't say I don't know about you. I know how you feel about some of these quarterbacks, maybe not all of them. But I really wasn't interested in the 5th round of trying to select one of these guys. And I was more interested in, okay, is there a possibility to obtain one through a trade? Was there a young one on someone's roster? And Joe Milton fit the bill. You have an organization. This is what you do when you're a front office is you target teams that have new coaching staffs because those coaching staffs didn't draft those players. Those aren't their guys. So these new coaching staffs come in, they look at tape. It's kind of like, people looking at the Dallas Cowboys. If some teams wanted to potentially trade for some guys off the Cowboys, these coaches, some of them weren't here. And so they probably don't have a feeling like, well, we can move on from this guy and I'd be okay with that. Whereas the previous coaching staff was like, no, that's our guy. We can't move on from that guy. So, Elliott Wolf and the New England Patriots, the front office had been together, but, you have a brand new coaching staff there. And the coaches sometimes just don't like the players that are currently there. They look at it as, well, some of these players got the previous coaching staff fired. And so if you can move on, and, there was some whispers that some people were happy with Joe Milton. There were some whispers that people weren't happy with Joe Milton. And Dallas, I think Dallas took advantage of the situation and said, listen, we'll go get our backup quarterback here. It does keep them, I think it's important because you and I, we've talked about this a bunch. Without that 4th-round pick, and you and I are going to do a little exercise today that I'm going to see what your sense of urgency is because you don't have a 4th-round pick and how this thing might play out. But Dallas had to find a way to get a quarterback. And I feel like they got a young one that's got some real, if you want to use a scouting term, some real upside to his ability.
Yes. Yeah, I think you brought up a great point in terms of essentially the Cowboys with all 3 of their trades They've just dropped down spots in the draft. They dropped 34 spots to acquire Kyrie Elam from Buffalo. They dropped 51 spots to get Kenneth Murray out of the Tennessee Titans, and then 46 spots essentially to acquire Joe Milton. So it is in a great point in terms of attacking new coaching staffs. And I know we had on our air the play-by-play voice of the Patriots was on our morning show with Sean and RJ, and he made the point about, and it is a new regime with Mike Vrabel, but they didn't want to fall into the same issue they had with Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi. And Drake May has made a lot of New England Patriot fans very excited, so there's not a quarterback controversy. But let's say all of a sudden Drake May goes down in week 4, and he's going to miss 4 weeks. And here comes Joe Milton, and you can see in that finale against Buffalo, there is some excitement with the way he plays, almost some Romo-esque, if you will, with his ability to create and extend plays. And, I mean, he's got a rare arm. He really, really does. We've gushed a lot about Jalen Milroe. Very comparable, maybe
very
even
simple.
A stronger arm than what Jalen Milroe has. I mean, this guy, he's flinging the ball 70 to 80 yards just on a dime easily. So they wanted to avoid and just get ahead of any type of potential quarterback drama and allow Drake May to just know, hey, I'm the guy there in New England. And Joe Milton, I mean, I think Dak Prescott's he's pretty inserted here. He is the guy, right? He's not going anywhere. So Joe Milton understands what's going on, and apparently he wanted to come to Dallas. We had Jordan Schultz report that there were some other teams that might have offered more, and the Patriots acquiesced to what Joe Milton wanted. And I think he probably sees, how much longer is Dak Prescott going to be playing? We've talked about the injury risk. Is it 2 years? Is it 3 years? So maybe Joe Milton does see the vision of, I could be the future quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys one day.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on all fronts there. And, we're not trying to run Dak out of the building, but we know what Cooper Rush was. We've seen Cooper Rush, and Cooper Rush for the times where he had to play. I think he ended up his career here. Dallas was 9-5, I think is what it was as a starter. And so, good for him for what he was able to do. And I think Cooper Rush was kind of like, you know what, I need to move on too. So I feel like this was kind of a mutual thing going on here. Trey Lance is, as we're recording today, is signed with the Chargers. So, there was some thought maybe that before the trade that, maybe a Trey Lance reunion, but, that never materialized. But, Dallas, to their credit, trying to upgrade their quarterback room. And, we'll see how it does play out. Like you mentioned, Joe Milton looked outstanding against Buffalo in that season finale. He had command of the offense. They were moving the football. The ball was going down the field. He made some incredible plays with his feet, as far as avoiding rush and getting completions on big plays, big chunk plays, ball going down the field. It wasn't a check down Charlie game where he just throws it to the backs and throws it to, there were some passes where he took some shots right hash to left sideline, and was very accurate doing that. So I think there's a great deal of promise. And you mentioned with Milroe, and Milroe will likely be taken very high in this draft. And I mean, high in a way of second round, likely. Sure. So you were never going to have a chance with Joe Milton there.
And Todd Archer reporting the Cowboys also had interest in adding Jacoby Brissett in free agency, but he goes to Arizona. Also discussed the possibility of Drew Lock, formerly of the Giants and the Seahawks. Joe Milton, though, under contract for 3 years on a much lower price. So Trey Lance was a guy that they also had talked about. I know we had both heard December they'd actually offered Trey Lance and his agent a contract. They turned it down, and good for him. Now he's found a home there with the LA Chargers. We had broke down like, well, maybe the Canadian Football League, there was an offer there, but he gets to stay in the NFL and develop. So I think when you look at the possible options, and to your point, if the Cowboys had to wait to the 5th round, this is best case scenario for the Cowboys getting a Joe Milton. I think he's a better upside type of quarterback than whom they would have been looking at, whether it was the Seth Hennigans out of Memphis, for example, or I mean, heck, name another quarterback that could have been there in the 5th round, because I don't think the Kyle McCords were going to fall there.
Well, Rourke from
Indiana.
Riley Leonard from Notre Dame. That's kind of the guys you were looking at right there. Yeah,
right. And can Riley Leonard is he a forward passing quarterback? I don't know so much. No disrespect to Riley Leonard there, but we did get some good information. Also got some laughs from Jerry. Jerry's always going to be entertaining. He always is. And we had the I don't even know Micah Parsons name drop. this week. We got some good insight from Ryan Schottenheimer when it came to, he used the phrase building from the outside in, kind of what they were looking at with the 12th overall pick. Do you think that was kind of taken a little bit out of proportion when it comes to Schotty talking outside in? Like maybe he feels they're kind of good on the inside, and that's why he was specifying that. I don't know, because I've always kind of thought inside out would be a preferable way to build a team. But hey, I'm going to let Brian Schottenheimer do what Schotty wants to do here. Let's just see how this thing goes.
They might feel better about their offensive linemen than they maybe do their defensive linemen, if that makes sense. I kind of feel like that they're going to have to address what's going on with, we'll see what the one technique, the three technique stuff, when you look at, with the addition of Oso Digizua, and what they did in free agency, you kind of feel like the three technique, but they need direct competition with Mozzie Smith. Even if they could upgrade Mozzie Smith, that would be great. But Mozzie Smith needs competition, and he needs somebody to push him. And if Mozzie Smith does not get pushed, and you go out there again, and he plays just okay, shame on you for not providing that. And this is the draft that you can, as you know, and have talked about for months now. The one technique room has some bodies, legitimate bodies, not just 332-pound men that just stand there and do nothing. There are guys that legitimately have pass rush ability, guys that have the ability to play the run, guys that have the ability to play outside the tackle box, guys that will push Mozzie Smith for his position, and that needs to be done. They might feel better than you and I do about Brock Hoffman, TJ Bass, people like that. They might feel Awesome Richards if they move him to guard. They might feel better about those guys than what maybe you and I do. We've talked about a Donovan Jackson from Ohio State. We've talked about Booker from Alabama. There's several of these tackles that you consider that you would maybe move to guard. So that would be something that had to be addressed. But maybe they don't like that group as much as some people do, and it is a little bit of a crapshoot, if you would say, for picking one of these guys. I think people who are looking at offensive tackles in this draft are probably selecting them and holding their breath all at the same time. Did we get the right guy? Is Campbell everything we think he is coming out of LSU? Can Banks from Texas play guard? Is Gray Zabel really another one of the long line of some North Dakota State kids that come in the league and play at a very high level, and we can play them at several spots? These are all legitimate questions, and people are going to hand in cards, here in a couple of weeks, and they're going to say, "Man, I hope we're right about this one," because there's a. But to your question was about outside in. Mm-hmm. They can act like they feel good at the wide receiver spot. I don't think they really can. I think there's been several years now where we've asked Tolbert, and he's got to take a step up. They mentioned Flournoy, Brooks, guys that have been here a couple of years, and you're kind of waiting for them to step up. So I think the opportunity of, adding one of these wide receivers in the draft, probably at 12, I think that's a really inviting thing for them.
Yeah, wide receiver 2 was brought up by Steven, by Brian Schottenheimer. Mm-hmm. That seemed to be a theme. I think they are hunting wide receivers there. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting as well as we get closer and closer to the NFL draft. Last topic I wanted to hit with you, because we'll have a ton of time to talk contracts. I want to nerd out with you about the draft, which we will do here. But Micah and getting this deal done, and Jerry was talking, him and Micah talked privately. And the more that I kind of dug into this, and you were there, you were in the building, you got to know kind of how Jerry operates. Yeah. Yeah. I think he does like to be able to kind of maybe negotiate these things one-on-one. There's probably an advantage to that if you can cut the agent out. Now, I've seen Des Bryant and other Cowboy players be very open on social media. Maybe that's a little bit of a, for lack of a better word, dirty way to play the game. Maybe you're trying to, get a better deal that is good for the Cowboys, maybe not as good for the player in that sense, right? But I do think, Micah and Jerry have an excellent relationship, and it seemed like there was some progress being made on the deal, and Micah said, hey, just talk to my agent, and I think eventually they will. So I'm hopeful this thing does get done sooner rather than later.
Yeah, a couple of things on that. Yeah, and Jerry has a history of that, through his ownership with the Cowboys. And Tony Romo tells the story about how Bill Parcells and Jerry and him met in a very small room, and they were insistent, you're going to sign this contract. You're going to sign this deal. And Tony's like, well, what are we doing? But Jerry has a history of going in and negotiating deals with players. He knows that, hey, you need to be here. You could go back. I mean, Smith, the linebacker, I'm sure that, when he was looking at things, he's like, listen, you're going to be here. Here's your contract, sign the thing, that kind of, and Jerry, that's kind of the way he operates. Jerry wants to step in and do things. It's funny about the whole thing with David Mulugeta and him not knowing his name and all that. I honestly think that Jerry just did not want to mispronounce David Mulugeta's name. I really don't. I think he knows who David Mulugeta is, the agent. I just don't think Jerry wanted to mispronounce his name, and that would be even more embarrassing. If you want to be honest about it.
Yeah,
but
we'd be playing that as a drop, probably.
And so I think it's very much that Jerry knows that Micah has a really, really good agent that's negotiated, close to $1 billion worth of deals. He's very good at getting everything he can for his client. He's very well respected around the league. So, I think that kind of takes care of itself. Do I think this deal will get done? Yeah, eventually I do. I think that, they have parameters. They have an idea of where this thing could fall. They understand how well Micah, what Micah means to this team. There's been a lot of talk over the years, and you and I have had these discussions on various platforms about, are there people in the organization that think it's a terrible idea to re-sign Micah Parsons? Those people have spoken, but it hasn't been with the last name Jones. Right. And so until the last name Jones says we need to trade this guy or move on from this guy or do something else with this guy and not sign him, then likelihood Micah Parsons is going to be signed. But like I say, there's a lot of folk in that organization that says, well, hey, Micah for this and Micah for that, but man, please keep an eye on this. So I kind of feel like, though, unless your last name is Jones, he's probably going to be a Dallas Cowboy.
And maybe a little challenge. Hey, Mike, are you going to be there this offseason? We got another new defensive coordinator. We got a new staff. Jerry was kind of hinting at that. Brian Schottenheimer seemed confident Micah would be there. So we will see in about a month if that's something that maybe the agent says don't show up. Maybe Micah just says, I don't need to do that like he did last year. But we'll see if he is at the Star in Frisco with the rest of his teammates for those OTAs, mini camps, and et cetera.
Yeah, and the commitment needs to be as well when Micah talks about being a leader and being there and all that. This is really a full-time job, and I applaud Micah for having other interests when it's not football. When it's not mandatory stuff. I applaud him for we do see workout videos, but we also do see travel to Japan. We see travel to basketball games. He's got other interests. He's really good with this podcasting stuff. I admire him. I'd love to have his audience as a podcaster. He is. It's impressive what he does. And so, but is he ever going to be Sean Lee with film prep? No. Is he ever going to be Leighton Vander Esch with film prep? No. That ain't going to happen. But maybe there's some things that he can be better on his end that the Cowboys will allow. We've seen this before. When you have superstar players, you can't let things get in the way. You and I work in a market that lost Luka Doncic. We lost him because of things that happened that he and the general manager did not see eye to eye. There's things that Micah is going to have to, okay, I'm willing. And then the Cowboys are going to have to say, okay, Micah, we're willing. I think there needs to be some of that before anything's done.
You are listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. Brian, it is time for your draft game, and I love these. Personally, I think our best draft shows are when we allow you to go ahead and do some things like that. I think it's always a blast. So I'm going to go ahead and let you take the reins on this. I'm going to pull up my draft notes, and let's have some fun here.
Okay, as you look at your draft notes, what we're going to do, Zach, is I want you to. I have a list, thanks to Todd Archer and others, and players. Thank you for your help as well. Of some of these guys that are 30 visit guys, and I want you to tell me where you have these 30 visit guys on your board, and then I want you to pick the 30 visit guys rounds 1, 2, and 3. Because I have a feeling, okay, and you just do it off the 30 visits of the names that we know so far, of the guys that we have that we've had. Let me get my list here in front. Like, okay, for example, Ibuka, McMillan, Burden, Judkins. I'm going to go through and you just tell me where you have these guys.
Okay.
And then when it's all said and done, I want you to pick them rounds 1, 2, and 3. And the first time I want you to do what you think the Cowboys are going to do.
Okay.
And the next time I want you to pick it what you would do. Okay.
All right.
Makes sense?
Yep.
Okay. The ones we know about are Ibuka from Ohio State, McMillan, Arizona, Burden, Missouri. Where would you have those 3 wide receivers?
I've got McMillan, Ibuka, and then Burden, personally.
All first round picks?
I've got McMillan and Ibuka in the first.
Okay.
I've got Burden in the top of the second.
Okay. Judkins, Henderson.
I've got Henderson in the second. I've got Judkins at the top of the third.
Okay. Banks, the guard tackle from Texas.
Mm-hmm. I actually put Banks in the first.
Okay, Banks is a 1 for you.
Yep.
Collins, the defensive tackle from Texas.
I put Alfred Collins in the bottom of the second round.
Reville from East Carolina.
He's a 2 for me.
Stewart, the edge from Texas A&M.
He is. He's kind of down there. I actually put him in the third.
Okay, that's fair. It's okay. There's you, me, and Vach Lombardi, who I do the Doing All Right podcast with on YouTube. We all have him in the third round.
Yeah.
So we're all floating around in the ocean right now.
Well, I'm glad I'm not alone. Yeah, I'm glad I'm not alone here. We're in this together. If he ends up being a star, we can all look at each other like, well, we missed him.
We missed that one for sure. We'll admit it. Judkins is the running back. We've already said him from okay. And you had a third round grade on him.
A 3 on him. Yes, sir.
Henderson, you had a 2.
Yep.
Banks, you had a 1. Collins, you had okay. How about Hampton?
Running back Hampton, I've got a 2 on.
Okay. And Makuba, the safety from Texas.
I've got a 2 on.
Okay. All right. So we know those names. We know those names. Who would you think the Cowboys, out of all those names that we listed, who do you think the Cowboys would take? Who the Cowboys would take at 12?
I do think the Cowboys would take Ted McMillan at 12, the wide receiver from Arizona. I think that them bringing him in makes me feel as though they're interested. I think the tape's really good. I do know there's at least a couple of people in that building that have him as wide receiver 1. I have no idea what the consensus is in that room, but I do think Ted McMillan, if he's there at 12, I think there's a strong chance that they do take him there out of the likelihood of those names. I don't know about Ibuka. That's the one I'm having a really tough time of getting a feel. Like, what exactly do they think of him? It's interesting that Golden has not been one of the names that they brought in the wide receiver out of Texas.
Do we know so far? Yeah, that we know so far.
Yes,
that
and maybe he will be. You're right.
Yeah. But like I say, those are the names that we know right now. Maybe there'll be some, 15 other names, and we could play this game a little bit later again. But I was just curious of the names that they had now. I'm with you. I find it interesting that they brought in Luther Burden, though.
Yeah.
I find that interesting that I don't know, are they covering their bases? Or they're trying to figure out, there's a lot of whispering going on and nothing, I have not heard anything terminal about him. I haven't heard about any domestic violence or alcoholism or anything like that would take him off boards. I just wonder if it's just the fact that, and you and I've used the word diva, which is associated with wide receivers that maybe a little bit hard to get along with. That people kind of just struggle with that. But his coach Eli Drinkwitz came out and said, "Hey, this guy is this guy's a great teammate. He's everything is above board with him. Don't worry about him." But he is a guy that has kind of fallen through some mock drafts, the media mock. We'll see if the teams feel the same way. But I found it interesting that they brought him in. Okay, at 44, and you've got several second round guys there. You've got the way that you spelled it out. Who do you think that the Cowboys would take at 44 there?
At 44, to the names that you gave, I do think Ravel is interesting. I think they need a corner, and I think that's kind of a Cowboy special. You get an injury player that falls to the second round that has first round tape, and Ravel out of East Carolina would fill that. I think he's a name that I think they would be considering, and I do think the runners. I think Hampton, Henderson. I do think even Judkins. I think all the runners are going to be in play.
Yeah. So, okay, if you had to make a choice then of those guys that you were talking about, and you walked them through, this is not you, because I'm going to ask you what you would do, when after all this is done. But what do you think the Cowboys would do at that point?
I think they would go Ravel, and they would gamble that they can circle back in the third and maybe get a runner that they like. Because the drop off there, I wonder how they feel about some of the other third round corners. And I do think I'd love to see the grade that they've got on Ravel. Because if they think they're getting a first round player in the second, I mean, that's very much like, and we talked about it on our show yesterday, the Trayvon Diggs draft, where they were considering him in the first and he falls to the second round.
Yeah, he goes from 17 to 60, right? In that draft when you get CeeDee Lamb. Yeah. Okay, on your board, do you feel like you have better third round corners than third round running backs?
I think it's actually pretty comparable. I think both of those stretch pretty well, because I'm looking at like Jacob Parrish out of K-State, Noah Williams out of Cal, Quincy Riley out of Louisville, who the D-backs coach was at. He was at his workout there at Louisville. So I like all those guys. And then I've got like the RJ Harveys out of UCF. Jordan James out of Oregon, Devin Neal out of Kansas, Sampson out of Tennessee. So I do kind of feel good either way. I think I would actually gamble and take Ravel because, man, if it weren't for that ACL, he might be my favorite corner in the entire draft.
I agree with you on that. I totally agree with you on that. Okay, let's pick a player then and I have a feeling I know the direction you're going to go here, but out of the guys that they visited, and let's see, it'd be interesting because give me the guy you would pick in the third round. I think I have an idea, but go ahead, give me the guy.
I would take RJ Harvey.
This is for the Cowboys of the visits.
Okay.
Of the visits. Of the visits.
Of the visits, then Quinshon Judkins, the running back out of Ohio State, because they have visited with him. He's come in. And if he's there at 76, I mean, Judkins is just a really good player. I've got Henderson over him because I love the speed. Henderson's the home run hitter. Judkins is I'm going to fight for the dirty yards, but he's a 3-down back. He can do everything for you in terms of catch out of the backfield. He looked like a little bit more of an explosive player at Ole Miss 2 years ago than he did last year, but he's got that physical between the tackles running style, much like you just had with Rico, but he does have more juice to his game than what Rico did.
Yeah, I like what you're talking about there with him. I'm a Henderson fan over Judkins, but like I said, I've got Henderson in the second and Judkins in the third is the way I have it. Okay, so for the Cowboys, what you think the Cowboys would do, McMillan, Ravel, Judkins, those would be the three that I would be pretty happy with that.
I'd be really happy.
Okay, what would Zach Wolchuk do? Would Zach Wolchuk do the exact same thing? Or
I think I would do, I would stick with McMillan. I think in the second round, I think I would take Henderson in the second. I think I would do that. There's something about Henderson, like I'm considering moving him up to my running back too. I just love the way he runs. I do. And
Yeah.
I think the pass protection with him is also really strong.
Mhm.
He was always a shared backfield. So I think he's a guy that he might be better in the NFL than he was at Ohio State. He does have some temperament problems. Like you saw it against Texas. He can get a little emotional in the game. You've got to calm him down. But I also do like to see that he cares. Like that dude gives an F, man. Like he wants to win. He is a super competitive son of a gun. I think with this group, I might go Henderson. And then in the third, the problem is they haven't met with the corners that I've got here. But I
would you consider Collins? Would you consider Collins the defensive
absolutely.
tackle?
Absolutely. I would take Alfred Collins there because I've got him as a 2. So if Alfred Collins was there at 76, I'd probably go McMillan. I'd say Travion Henderson, let's ride. And I've got my running back for the next 4 years. And then I'd take Alfred Collins in the third, assuming everything's okay with that calf, which supposedly it is. But I got to make sure the medical's okay because, I've got a soft spot for Alfred Collins. I love that kid. But, man, the medical's got to be okay on him.
Let me try and throw a wrench into this thing for you in the second round for what you would do.
Okay.
Where do you have Makuba?
Yeah, see, I've got Makuba as my second best safety overall.
Yeah.
And I do have him over some of these running back options, because again, like safety doesn't, there's some good safeties. Yeah. I don't feel as good about safety if I waited to the third round as I do about running back. So if I want to go ahead and get my difference making safety, I'm taking Makuba in the second. He can compete in that spot.
So over Henderson then, right?
Yeah, I would take Makuba over Henderson.
So you would go, how would this then look for you then? How would it be? Would it be?
So for me, I'd probably go McMillan,
Makuba.
And then I guess I'd probably go RJ Harvey, the UCF running back in the third, if I had my choice.
Yeah. If you had your choice, if guys they visited and stuff like that, if he was on the board, but I would think that I was just trying to go off the list of guys that they visited so far, just to try and see who you would pick out of that group. I think Collins is still in play for sure on that. Me personally, I went, and the problem I had a problem with. I went McMillan, then I came down to Reville, and it came down to Makuba, and it came down to Henderson.
Yeah, it's tough.
And I took Reville because I have a first round grade. So he's one of my 15. So I went McMillan, Reville, and then I took Judkins in the third. I have him in the third round. So that's the draft how I would do it. I think that they're going to go with McMillan. I think they're going to go with Henderson, and then I think that maybe we'll see Collins here. Maybe we'll see Collins here.
What do you think about because they also met with Tootin, the Virginia Tech runner? You think he's a play in the third?
I think that would be an absolute possibility there too. Yes, I do. I do. And I know on my board, I have him near the bottom of my third round grades because I've got, Sampson and all those guys coming down the board. But Tootin would be a guy that I would absolutely consider. The guy I feel like that we're really, really gambling on, and we mentioned it, is Stewart from Texas A&M. They obviously like Stewart more than you and I and Voch Lombardi do. And we might be proven wrong. We'll see. But Stewart, I don't think, is a 44. Stewart, I think, for a lot of people, might be 12.
Sure.
And so that's the one guy that could be in the mix, that if they drafted Stewart, I would have the most, I would say, okay, I got to, I'm going to grit my teeth and, okay, here we go. And I hope they're right and I'm wrong, kind of a thing. But I would, man, if you told me that I could go into day 3, knowing that I had McMillan, Reville, and say Judkins all on my team, I would feel really, really, really good about that.
I would as well. Do you think that them bringing in Luther Burden, with how we've seen him starting off as a top 15 player, now maybe a second rounder, is that, a trade back option. If they're able to get somebody to play ball, they're kind of just going ahead and dotting their I's, crossing their T's in case, hey, they can go back to 20 with Denver, or just throwing a 18 to Seattle and maybe Burden's more in play there.
I don't discount what you're doing. You know what? I've got Luther Burden as my second best wide receiver. I've got him a first round grade. I'm not going to move him just because of somebody's telling me that he might be a diva. Yeah. We're hearing things, and I know, and Nick Harris has done a really, really, really good job of, with some of these players, but we've heard some things about like Pierce from Tennessee. Like, hey, he's off a lot of people's boards, and it's not just being a diva guy. I mean, there's things that, and maybe there's some things we're having to run down about Mike Green too, from Marshall is another guy that, but he's not, as we know right now, he's not a visit here, and neither is Pierce a visit here as well. But, those are the guys that seem like they have stuff that would take him off the board. I don't think Luther Burden has that. I think he just has that moniker of a guy that might be a little bit difficult to deal with, but he's no different than a lot of wide receivers that have played in this league.
My issue with Burden, I guess, is the downfield stuff. I think he's really good at adjusting on the sideline back shoulder. Mm-hmm. There just seemed to be a disconnect with the deep shots downfield. Now, maybe that was a quarterback problem. Maybe I'm putting that on Burden when really the quarterback play was erratic last year at Mizzou. Mm-hmm. It wasn't as much of a problem 2 years ago, but there's something where it just he doesn't attack the ball like I see some of the other players do when it comes to high pointing it. The hand, like he's more of, I got to get the ball underneath to him, just get the ball in his hands and then let him go. And that transition scares me a little bit compared to like Emeka Egbuka. Does he have the high-end capability of a Luther Burden? No, but he's a great route runner. He does all the little things well, right? The hands, to me, are a little bit more consistent. Like Burden, the playmaking is special with him. The explosiveness, the acceleration, it's rare. But there's just certain things that fear me a little bit. Is he a little bit gimmicky? I don't know if that's like a rude word to throw at the guy, but that's the one thing compared to like a Ted McMillan who wins downfield, right? Egbuka, even who's the other receiver I have ahead of him? Matthew Golden. I just see win consistently more down the field than I do a Luther Burden.
Yeah, I think it's I'm with you in a lot of ways. I do think he tracks the ball well. I think you make some excellent points, though. But I am fascinated that Dallas brought him in. It makes me feel a lot better because there's a lot of teams or a lot of these mock drafts, media mock drafts, again, that don't even have him in the first round. And I think you're on to something about the trade back stuff. Zach, thank you very much for playing the game.
You are listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. It's time for the Dean Julia mailbag, Brian Broaddus, as we get some of your questions. And we do have a question from Dean Julia himself, the man, the myth, the legend. He did ask us about Ravel, who we just talked about, but he has another question. Who is a round 5 running back or later that both of you would stand on the table for? Do you have a guy round 5 or later that you would stand on the table for, Brian Broaddus?
Yeah, and what's going to happen is some of these 4th round running backs are going to fall through the draft, and I'm interested. I'm interested to see where Ollie Gordon from Oklahoma State goes. Is Ollie Gordon more of a 3rd or 4th round guy, or is he more of a 5th round guy? The speed lack of is he timed poorly. There's times where you don't see him play with that explosive running. I mean, he is a banger. No, don't get me wrong. The size is good. The way he catches the ball, he's not the most shifty or the most. I think when you talk about just breakaway speed, I think Hunter from Auburn would be a guy. Vach really likes Krosky Merritt from he was at New Mexico, Arizona. He might go higher than that. Where's Allen from Syracuse going to go? Now, here's a guy that and maybe he's a 4th round guy as well, but there's some complete back traits to him. He's the one back in this draft that has over 60 receptions. As a matter of fact, he holds the Syracuse record for most receptions with a back for a career of like 119. So here's a guy that the running style, he's a high cut guy, meaning his legs are real long, upper body short. But he is a guy that when you talk about just run until he hears glass break, I mean, he's just banging into people and he catches the ball well. He's a willing pass blocker. Where does he go? Does somebody like that running style? I mean, he's one of those guys that I don't know how long he's going to last in the NFL just running into people. But that's kind of how he plays. But Allen, Gordon, Hunter, Krosky, Merritt. Mullins from Michigan.
Yeah, Khalil Mullins from Michigan.
All these guys are guys that probably will be in that range that Dean's asking about.
Yeah, Ollie Gordon, it's crazy because this is a guy that should have come out 2 years ago, or last year's draft. He really should have, because I've got him in the 5th personally, and
me too.
He labors. I mean, you watch him run, and I mean, he's got a power bottom. The dude's really, really thick in the lower body, but gosh, it looks tough for him when he's running. Like the hips are so stiff, but he does have some elusiveness in the open field. It just looked like he was hesitant running the ball this year. Like he didn't trust what was in front of him.
Well, the people who cover the league, and they'll say that the offensive line was poor, and then the quarterback play was poor, and then teams were loading up on him. So, yeah, he went from a Doak Walker winner to a guy that's going to maybe be drafted late 4, early 5.
A guy that we haven't mentioned. One, I just want to throw in Taj Brooks because I love Taj Brooks. I have
Taj Brooks.
He's
Taj
a third
Brooks,
for me.
Much
he's
higher,
not going to be. He's not in this. But Jaquindon Jackson, the running back at Arkansas, and that's a Dallas State guy. And he's a big back too, 6'1", 229. The issue is he needs to clean up these fumbles. I mean, I saw him try run over a guy against Oklahoma State, and he just coughs the damn ball up. If he can figure out, but he's new to the position. He's really only played it 2 years. He's a converted quarterback, but he does have some nice initial quickness and burst. He cuts well. He can power through tacklers. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. I think he's a guy that with coaching, he's got the talent. So if you're taking a flyer and maybe he's a guy that can slip to even the 6th round, that's a name, Jaquindon Jackson, the running back at Arkansas. Started his career at Texas, transferred to Utah, was their starting running back there at Utah 2 years ago, and then played last year. Was the first Arkansas running back since Alex Collins to have 15 rushing touchdowns. This guy's got a little bit of a nose for the end zone. So just a name to throw out there as we're talking about day 3 guys that we haven't mentioned yet. Okay, last question here before we get out of here. I know we're shortening the mailbag, but Brian's got to get on the road. He's got to go see the kiddo. And tell Bennett I said hello, please, sir.
Thank you. Parents Weekend in Austin, folks, so I apologize for the short question.
Okay, our buddy Mark Dempsey across the pond in England. What are your thoughts on CJ West, please, as a nose tackle option? Really liking him. Have a high 3 grade on him. I'll tell you what, Mark, that's a good eye on our guy CJ West.
Yeah, I am a fan of CJ West. I know that you and Vach were one of the first that I heard about when you guys you're doing your outstanding coverage, I believe, at the Shrine game, right?
Yeah, he dominated every practice, man. He really did.
Yeah, this kid is a transfer from Kent State, and he has the ability to impact games with his play. I mean, he was, as I mentioned, Zach was telling me, like, you need to watch this kid from Indiana because he was difficult to block through the practices, the initial burst of the snap. I thought he was especially good when it came to playing down the line of scrimmage. He could be really good when playing on the move by shooting the gaps. You'll see him play as a head-up, heavy nose and as a tackle as well, like a one technique. But impressive how the ball goes wide, and he kind of could work with right down to it and play with leverage, holding off blockers while he's moving. And I think that, man, he makes plays behind the line of scrimmage. He is going to be, when his pad level is down, he's a hard guy to control, but sometimes that pad level will get up. I watched Nebraska and Ohio State specifically on that. But he's going to fight with his hands. He's going to attempt to get rid of blockers, and he's got the power to handle double teams. I mean, it's kind of thrown his way. I like how quick he can be off the ball. He's 6'1". He's 316 pounds. He is super, super active, and I agree very much with where I have him in the 4th. I don't have him in the 3rd, but I think that he's kind of right there with with Collins, Phillips, Caldwell. Those are guys I kind of have him in that same group with. He's probably going to go. You're probably right. He's probably going in the third, but I know myself. I have him in the fourth round there.
Yeah, I put him in the third, and just for the Cowboys, I think you'd have to snag him at 76 if they wanted him.
I think so. I think so too.
Unless they can trade back and pick up a 4, but you're right, the hand fighting stands out. Yeah. And the first step quickness, but his ability to just fight off blocks with his hands, he does not allow blockers to get into his chest. CJ West, just another name in a stacked defensive tackle class here. Brian, thank you so much, my man. I know you got to get on the road.
Yep.
I appreciate you. We'll be back. Don't you worry. We got more Love of the Star as we get closer and closer to the draft. Of course, you can catch us also on the Draft Show and on 105.3 The Fan, 2 to 7 p.m. Central Time, also on the Odyssey app as well. Thank you so much, Peyton Russell, for producing as always. For Eric Chiafalo, for Brian Broaddus, I'm Zach Wolchuk. Thank you for tuning into Love of the Star. Like, subscribe, tell your friends. Until next time, hugs and hand pounds, everybody.